Hi, everybody. This is WWE superstar Jerry the King Lawler, and this is the King's Podcast on theDugoutSportsShow.com.
Welcome to the first edition of the King's Podcast with Jerry the King Lawler, here exclusively on the DugoutSportsShow.com. I'm very excited to welcome Jerry the King Lawler to the podcast. We have Chris Perez from the Indians doing the 60 Seconds with Pure Rage. I have Boobie Gibson from the Cavaliers doing a podcast called Boobie's Podcast. And I'm very, very excited to have Jerry on. Jerry, thanks for agreeing to do this, and I look forward to talking Cleveland sports with you and talking wrestling.
Well, Glenn, I'm excited about it as well. Like you said, you got Chris Perez, you got the Cavaliers, and now you got the WWE. This thing is growing and building. It's going to be like a juggernaut before you know it.
Yeah, definitely. I just need to get a Browns player. We're working on getting a Browns player, hopefully today or tomorrow. I'll know. But I have the full spectrum and also have WBE. And a lot of people don't know this about you, that you're a big Cleveland sports fan. You grew up in the area. You're here for 8 years. You're a big Browns Indians fan. I mean, people all over the country know who you are. They know your voice. They know your face and being on WBE television. But here in Cleveland, when you came here earlier this month to throw the first pitch out, and we did the thing with Chris Perez, people were like, wow, Jerry the King Lawler is a big Indians fan, and people were shocked. So, but you grew up in the area. You were here for 8 years. Explain a little bit about that and becoming a Cleveland fan.
Well, you're right, Glenn. It's like I take it for granted that most of the at least WWE Cleveland fans know that I have that Cleveland connection from my childhood. But in actuality, we are making so many new fans on a daily basis that a lot of people don't know that backstory. But yeah, when I was 8 years old, of course, originally from Memphis, Tennessee. That's where I was born. That's where I live now. But when I was 8 years old, my dad worked with a Ford Motor Company, and he got transferred with his job from Memphis to a little town. I think they built a new Ford assembly plant out in Vermillion, Ohio. And so we moved from Memphis. We first we lived in three different little towns there before we settled into the one we lived in at first in Lorain, then in Vermillion, and then in Amherst. And we stayed in Amherst, Ohio for about 8 years. So from the time I was 8 years old until the time I was 16, we were just a little more than 20 miles from Cleveland and from Cleveland Stadium. So moving from Memphis, where we had no pro sports teams at the time, and then suddenly being right there on the shores of Lake Erie and being able to watch and see the Indians and the Browns, I became a diehard Cleveland sports fan, and growing up playing Little League and then junior high baseball and all this sort of thing in the area. Everybody wanted to be like at that time. Rocky Colavito was a big star for the Indians, and of course Jim Brown playing for the Browns. It was a great time in Cleveland sports history there. And so when I moved back to Memphis 8 years later, when I was 16 years old, we still didn't have any pro sports teams. So I just remained a Cleveland sports fan my entire life. Most people down here were pulling for either St. Louis or Atlanta, and I just stayed a Cleveland sports fan, and it's worked well for me. Other than the fact that it's been a while since world titles there in Cleveland, but still, once I got into the WWE and started wrestling and everything, I had my chance to go back to Cleveland and meet a lot of people connected with the franchises there. Find out there's a lot of wrestling fans in that area, and also that are Cleveland Indians and that are Cleveland Browns over the years. It's been a great relationship that I've had with both teams, actually.
Now you said Jim Brown and Rocky Colavito. Any players that stick out in your mind growing up and becoming a huge fan of here in Cleveland?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I was a fan throughout the years. I mean, literally a diehard fan that would tune into 1100 every night. I can't tell you what a traveling companion the radio station was at night, listening to the Indians games when I was on wrestling road trips. That big 50 or 100,000 watt station get out all over the country, and I'd be down wrestling down in the Mid-South area and could still turn my radio in. And some nights it was a little scratchy, or if it was stormy weather, going in and out. But I still, I'd listen to the Indians games every single night. Now, I mean, there's been countless numbers of players. Of course, during the 90s, so many guys. Kenny Lofton, I did some artwork. A lot of people don't realize this either. I also do some commercial artwork. I did a piece of art for Kenny Lofton's Kenny's Kids charity, and we auctioned that off and helped to raise some money for that. So there's been so many guys that I was able to meet and become friends with. Right now, Travis Hafter is a good friend of mine, and we talk and text on a regular basis, and it's just I had him as my guest at WrestleMania and some of the WrestleMania after parties and all that sort of stuff. So it's there's just been a lot of guys. Charlie Manuel, when he was managing the Indians, Charlie was one of my favorites too. He's a big WWE fan and followed us pretty closely. So it's easy to become friends with guys that like what I do as well. Like now Matt Laporta and Austin Kearns. A lot of the guys on there are kind of follow the WWE fairly closely too.
Yeah, are players surprised when you do come out to a ballpark and here in Cleveland, and some of the new guys on the team, and they realize you're a huge Indians fan? Do you get a lot of surprise reactions like, "Wow, Jerry, I didn't know you were a huge Cleveland fan"?
Well, sometimes, but I think over the years it has become sort of common knowledge, and I do sometimes when I don't get to the games as often as I'd like to. I mean, but I really, if I'm here at home, I have the Sports Time Ohio and the baseball package at Major League Baseball Extra Innings. So I'm basically, I pretty much get to watch every single game and try to get to as many as I can. But yeah, when I get up there and go down into the locker room and that sort of thing, yeah, it's kind of neat when the guys come up and. But the funny thing, and this happens to me all the time. They'll come up to me and want to talk about wrestling, and of course I'm wanting to talk about baseball because but that's something they do on a regular basis. Is not that exciting to talk about, and the same vice versa with me. I'm around the wrestling so much, I'd rather talk about anything but that when I'm away from it.
Right, definitely. Also, you actually back in the day when you were a heel wrestler, when the Browns moved to Baltimore, I read that you actually wore a Ravens jersey during a pay-per-view or during a match. Is that true?
Yeah, that was Vince McMahon's idea, not mine, of course. It was like that was right after Art Modell had moved the team to Baltimore, and yeah, I mean I
that'd be hard for you, man.
Oh my gosh, I'm telling you, it's probably one of the most difficult things that I've ever done in this job. But once again, and if anybody knows anything about Vince McMahon and what kind of boss he is, you don't cross that boss. I mean, so he just thought it would be amusing to wear that jersey out there. So I did, and I still have that. I still have the jersey hanging upstairs in my closet. I've never put it on since.
That's almost having down Cleveland having a LeBron James jersey, almost as bad.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what? I mean, it's funny. When you know guys and when you have sort of a personal relationship with some of the guys, even though they went to Baltimore, man, some of the nicest guys I ever met and had good times with was like Ozzie Newsome.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you won't find a better guy than Ozzie Newsome. Everybody knows that, and that was just it was just a business decision. One of the reasons that I first got to meet some of the Cleveland guys and some of the Cleveland Browns was one of the guys that worked in the front office with Cleveland was named Kevin Byrne. I don't know if you're familiar with Kevin, but he's still with the Ravens, and he's still a good friend of mine. And that was just a business decision that was made that it wasn't necessarily popular with all the guys on the team, but they had to do it.
Now onto Indians baseball, and like I said, we've heard from you plenty of times saying you're a huge Indians fan, and you have the STO down where you live, and you follow the games when you can. Are you surprised that we're here in June, late June, and the Cleveland Indians are in first place in the AL Central? A lot of people thought last place, fourth place for this team, but are you surprised that we're sitting in first place this late in the season?
Well, I'll say this: I'm certainly pleasantly surprised. But it's like when we look that this team has a lot of talent, and it's a young team. So I guess after maybe after the first month, and the Indians had such a commanding lead in first place, then it suddenly I guess the surprise wore off to me. I thought, hey, these guys are this good, and I still believe they are. I think they went through a slump, and to me when I watch them, and I try to watch. I love the shots of the guys in the dugout to try to read their expressions on their faces and their reactions to things, and just to try to get an idea of what's going through those young guys' mind. And I just think that that every team goes through. Every team goes through some slumps in that, and I feel like this particular team, there's so many young guys on there that they may not know yet how to handle adversity. So it's just one of those things where you hope that they don't get. I don't know. They say winning and losing are both contagious. It's like you hope that they don't get used to not being as successful as they were in the first part of the season. I just hope they can bounce back out of this thing and turn things around. I mean, but it's hard to think that anyone is going to be able to continue on the kind of roll they were on early in the season. I mean, my gosh, all the pitchers were clicking. Everybody was hitting. It was just amazing, and so. But I still have, I still got really high hopes. I think these guys are going to do really well.
And talking to you, you're an Indians fan, and you're big in wrestling. There were, back in the '90s when I was growing up and being a huge fan, the great Indians teams, and Indians going to the World Series '95, '97, winning AL Central titles by 20 plus games, and it being basically over in June or July. I kind of compare it to that same time period in wrestling, the Attitude Area where that's where wrestling really exploded. And I kind of compare it to Indians. That's when the Indians really exploded. New ballpark, new faces, free agents coming to Cleveland. A lot of people can argue that we'll never see that kind of era in wrestling again, going towards more PG, no more DX girls flashing and stuff like that, and Stone Cold flipping the bird on national TV. And a lot of people can compare that to the Indians. We might never see a team like that again, and a dominance like that here in Cleveland. Is that
yeah, well, you're right, Glenn. I mean,
yeah.
A lot of people don't stop and think. I mean, I don't know if through the entire decade, even though they didn't win a World Series, I don't know if anybody through the entire decade of the '90s was any more successful than the Indians franchise. I mean, it was that entire 10-year period there that just things went great, and to be in the World Series twice and to win all the division titles that they did, it was it was amazing. But yeah, I don't think that's I try to keep a positive outlook about something like that. I think that is possible to repeat again. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's going to just take getting that one right combination of a team that clicks, and then once they get that one divisional championship under their belt, I think then they can, especially with this team now. I mean, it's such a young team. These guys, if they could pull that off and get that winning habit and have that winning become contagious. I mean, this is a young team that could continue on and dominate for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's more likely Indians can come back and sell out games. 400 plus consecutive sellouts, and that was an era of Indians baseball where teams before were terrible. I mean, losing 100 plus games a season. Not even having 1,000 people show up the old stadium on the lake, mistake on the lake they call it. I mean, it's even in 2007 though, I don't, and Indians were winning the division, but they weren't even selling out games. I mean, the Indians didn't sell out games until the Indians actually won the division and playoffs were coming. So I think the fans, for that to happen again, the fans got to be persuaded that, okay, this isn't just a flash in the pan. This is going to be for 5-6 years like it was in the 90s.
Right. And you mentioned, Glenn, you talked about that period in the WWE. It was called, it gained a title. It was called the Attitude Era.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the Indians need to get. It is so much about an attitude. It's about a winning attitude, and that breeds success. And I think that's one of the most difficult things for these young guys to finally grasp, is that winning attitude. But once they have it, I mean, you can see it happen. I'll tell you one guy that it's happened to right before our very eyes, and that's Asdrubal Cabrera.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen the maturation of this young man. You've seen this guy go and right before, like I said, right before our very eyes, you've seen him gain that winning attitude, and he has that right now. I mean, this is a guy that we all know without any shadow of a doubt should be the starting shortstop in the All-Star game, and that's just it's just come about with time. If we could get every one of those young players to mature and to come along and progress like Asdrubal Cabrera has, man, can you imagine what a team this would be?
Oh, right. You get 3 or 4 players like him, pitching or hitting. Hopefully Chu gets back on track, Sizemore gets back on track. The effect of Hafner. I never thought, I'll admit to this, I never thought we would see the old Travis Hafner. But with Hafner being injured, and the Indians, it's kind of funny, when Hafner went out, the Indians started to skid, and when Hafner gets back in the lineup, they sweep the Pirates. They're playing better baseball. I mean, the Hafner effect is hard to deny.
Well, once again, it's an attitude, and I think Travis has that attitude, and he just brings it along when he's there. It's contagious. He just brings that along to the rest of the players, and it just needs to spread among all of these young guys. Because it's no doubt, man, they have the talent. There's some talented young guys on this team, and once they get that attitude, once they get that winning attitude, I think this is going to be a team that'll be a lot of fun to watch for a long time.
Definitely. And now moving on to wrestling before we wrap up the first edition of the Kings podcast, I want to talk some wrestling with you. Obviously, the big news in wrestling for the last couple months is next year at WrestleMania, The Rock versus John Cena. And I can't remember being a fan for over 16 years that a match was made a year in advance. And
you know what? I've been in this business over 40 years, and I can never remember it either.
Yeah.
That a match is going to have a year-long build-up. I guess the reason that's not done very often is because this business is so unpredictable.
Yeah.
I mean, either one of these guys could have some kind of major injury or something happen to them that they're not going to be able to compete a year from now. But right now the match is made, and it's a match that a lot of people thought that they would never, ever see. And as a matter of fact, I'll bet you 2 years ago you could have asked John Cena or The Rock, and they would have guaranteed that match would never take place. But now it looks like it will, and it's like it'll almost be like seeing, at one time it would have been like seeing Mike Tyson go against Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
One of the most improbable matches ever. We have WWE has a new video game out called All Stars, where it has all the big stars from the past against the stars from the present, and there's so many matches that can only take place on that game, and up until now, we thought that's the only place that match could take place. But it looks like now WrestleMania, Miami next year, is going to be The Rock versus John Cena.
Yeah, I mean, you can compare it to back at WrestleMania 18 in Toronto in 2002, The Rock versus Hulk Hogan, but known as Hollywood Hogan. During the match, and you saw the change of Hollywood Hogan turned back into Hulk based by the fans because Hogan was the heel and The Rock came out and it almost seemed like Hogan was the face and The Rock was the heel. The way the crowd changed it.
It switched right in the middle of that match. I mean, you're right. You're using terms that we use in the wrestling business, sort of. I guess you would call them inside terms, but it was just short names that wrestlers started using for each other instead of just saying good guy or bad guy or fan favorite or fan not favorite. But yeah, the people that the wrestlers that the fans are not that crazy about have been nicknamed heels, which is, what, really that's such an antiquated term. I think that probably back in the 40s, if a guy was a real jerk, he was known as a heel or a cad or something like that. So it's really an antiquated term. But yeah, Hulk Hogan went into that match being the heel or the bad guy or whatever. But man, it switched. The fans switched right in the middle. And the funny thing was, and the good thing was, The Rock didn't try to fight it. The Rock went with it. He just went with what the fans wanted, and he could tell that the fans were going to be more for Hulk Hogan than they were for him, and he took the ball and ran with it, and it made, to me, a lot of people will ask me what was the most exciting match that you ever called as a commentator, and I say that one because it was like, once again, as you said, like this upcoming match with Cena and The Rock. It was a match I never thought I'd see, but it took place, and it was as exciting as any match I've ever called.
Yeah, I was actually made the trip up from Cleveland to Toronto to see it, and just being a part of the crowd and just be able to feel the electricity. I mean, I've been to a ton of games. I've been to concerts. I've been to Cavs playoff games, Indians World Series. I have never experienced a crowd like that ever in my life. Just to feel the electricity of the moment, not only just for that match, but just throughout the whole night. And I'm sure you broadcasted in a ton of huge crowds. Has there ever been a crowd just like that kind of gave you goosebumps or made the hair stand on top in the back of your neck?
Well, honestly, Glenn, I've done so many of them. That doesn't really it doesn't really stand out in my mind. I mean, I don't remember matches or crowds in that way. Once we get the headsets on out there at the broadcast table, it's like, it's almost like they all sound the same.
Yeah.
We have some big enthusiastic crowds every single Monday night for Raw, and some places we know are going to be a little more rowdy, a little more upbeat than others. It's like, for instance, as always, we know when we go into Philadelphia, which was a place where, I don't know, I think one time we had a Santa Claus make an appearance on one of our shows in Philadelphia, and the fans booed Santa Claus. So they're pretty tough, and they're pretty tough in Philadelphia, and the good guys know that they're gonna be ridden pretty hard, especially John Cena. That's why when I had the match on my birthday last year against the Miz for the championship in Philadelphia, I was surprised at the reaction I got there. It was a major positive reaction, so much so that they decided to go a little further with that scenario, me getting matches against the Miz. But there's some places where the fans are a little extra rowdy.
Yeah, before I really wrap it up, because we can spread wrestling talk for every single episode of the weekly podcast in Indians baseball. But the Miz, he's from Cleveland, from Parma. Do you find yourselves talking about the Tribe or Browns or anything?
Absolutely. The Miz and I talk about the Tribe every single week.
Has there ever been, last question before I let you go, has there ever been a pitch that you just regret, that maybe you did it Obama style, you throw it into the ground or you threw it over the catcher's head? Is there a lot of pressure for a first pitch?
Oh, it really is a lot of pressure for a first pitch. As a matter of fact, if you remember, just a few weeks ago there in Cleveland, I thought I was going to be the only person throwing out the ceremonial first pitch, and then, of course, at the last minute, they had about 3 or 4 other people that they added, just I don't know, different fans for whatever reason. But then one of the Cavaliers basketball players showed up, and he had a young girl, and I don't know if she was I didn't get the full situation on why she was there to get to throw out a, he brought her there to throw out her first pitch, but she looked like she was maybe 9 or 10 years old, right? And so they let her throw right before me, and oh my gosh, you threw a perfect strike. And so now I've got to follow like a 10-year-old girl on the mound, and yeah, that was big pressure. But thank goodness that was one of my I did come through under pressure. It was like one of the best pitches that I've thrown, and Vinny Pastano was doing the catching, and so I did throw a decent pitch. But yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've bounced it in, and you learn that the harder you try to throw the ball, or the faster you try to throw it, the more tendency it has to go to sink on you and go right down into the dirt. So I've got a big stash of balls back here. They let you keep the ceremonial first pitch, and I've got a big stash of balls, and quite a few of them have a scuff or dirt mark on them there. So it's not as easy as it sounds.
All right, well, Jerry, hopefully this is the first of many weekly podcasts, the Kings podcast here at DugoutSportsShow.com. I had a great time talking Indians baseball. We'll talk Indians baseball, some more wrestling, and hopefully, knock on wood, this lockout for the NFL will be over, and we could talk some football as well and get into football mode because it's going to be coming pretty rapidly.
Yeah, you're right, Glenn. I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks for the opportunity, and we'll talk to everybody next week.